Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa Tova. And today I have the absolute pleasure to introduce you to multifaceted life of the Honorable Laura Drager, who is a retired New York judge and now in private practice as a counsel with a law firm called Lee Anuf Chung, based out of Manhattan, New York. Now, with her rich background in law and a legacy on the bench, she also now guides couples through the complexities of mediation. But let me tell you something. Beyond her illustrious legal career, Judge Drager is a global traveler with an appetite for adventure, and I mean it. From the African safari to icy expanses of Antarctica to the biodiversity of Galapagos, and that's just a sliver of it. She lived a very captivating life, and today we are privileged to have her share her story. Welcome, Judge Drager.
Thank you, Denise, and lovely introduction. Thank you.
So, becoming a judge, that's typically something that one does not set out to do right away. So, going back in a time machine from when you were a young girl, could you tell us about your journey? What led you to the law and eventually to the judgeship?
Okay, so I'm a native Manhattanite, grew up and raised in Manhattan, and attended the University of Rochester and then went right on to Columbia Law School. And my only knowledge of a lawyer was Perry Mason, and I aspired to be a criminal defense attorney. um, I don't think I really knew too much about the law, but it seemed to match my personality. And But by the time I had finished law school, I swerved in a different direction and worked for a few years at the law firm Proskauer Rose in the labor department. And that experience really convinced me that I could do prosecutorial work and had the very good fortune that Robert Morgenthau was elected district attorney in Manhattan. And he gave me the opportunity to work in his office as an assistant district attorney. And I found that really matched uh, my personality in that I think a good prosecutor is someone who is really looking to see that justice is done and to not to go after someone unless I am convinced that somebody is guilty, because how do I convince a jury if I'm not convinced of a person's guilt? I worked there for, I think it was 6 years, and then when Elizabeth Holtzman was elected DA in Brooklyn, went to work in her office, ultimately as chief of the Rackets Bureau, investigating organized crime and official corruption, and then had the very good fortune of being appointed to the bench by Mayor Ed Koch, uh, presiding over criminal matters, both misdemeanor and then felony cases. And then, after doing that for 11 years, uh,
Wow.
had the somewhat extraordinary opportunity of being allowed to move over to handle and preside over matrimonial cases. Um, and that was a very interesting transition from, although seemingly different, there is a lot of similarity
Hmm.
in the sense that both are very fact-driven areas. The law is not so complex, but it's the fact patterns. Every case is different. And it was a very interesting transition, and I found that I just loved that area of law and presided over matrimonial cases in a dedicated matrimonial part for 20 years before retiring from the bench. But the thing that I liked most, of course, about doing matrimonial cases was to help people settle the cases and try to resolve the matters without having to go to trial. And so it was a natural progression once I retired from the bench to uh, develop a mediation practice in the divorce area. So that's it in a
How,
nutshell.
in a nutshell, that's a big nutshell. that's a that's a lot. There's a lot in there. I almost wanted to stay here and talk about mediation. But before I do, when you became a judge the first time, how did that compare to Perry Mason shows? I mean, what what was that like?
Well, I think pretty early on, much earlier than that, I realized that Perry Mason was fiction. I'd like to think I knew that even
Right.
before I handled my first case. Uh, but what I really like, both in terms of criminal law and in matrimonial law, is that really what we're trying to do is in a way to help people. And even
Mm,
I was very fortunate in the both district attorney's offices that the focus was really on if not people think of plea bargaining as being a bad thing, but at times it's a very good thing if you can help save someone from a much more
mm,
serious sentence, uh, who might be deserving of that, or being given the opportunity to participate, certainly at that time, in a drug rehabilitation program, um, trying to come up with solutions for domestic violence victims. All of these issues really are part of the process of, I think, a good prosecutorial office. And many of those same concerns follow in a divorce action where you're trying to help two people going through a very bad time in their lives get to a better place, and also to help the children in a divorce.
mm. Right, because those children sometimes end up in the middle, many times end up in the middle. Um, how do you find mediation to be different than being a judge? And what were aspects of this work that you felt maybe you had to grow through a little bit, some of the aha moments?
Yeah. So the difference, I would say, is the people that you see in mediation are people who want to settle the case. They come in, they are not interested in litigation. They're trying to keep the expense down. They want to come up with solutions, and they're open to hearing suggestions of how to solve what can be a very knotty life problem. How do you divide the money? How will each parent spend time with the children? Um, I think what is challenging from coming off the bench is, whereas I was used to saying, okay, here's what you're going to do because I'm ordering it.
Yeah.
Now in
Yes.
media, it's really the most I can do or should be doing is giving suggestions and having the parties themselves, decide what will work. And sometimes people come in with very interesting solutions that I wouldn't have thought of, but will work for them. And
Mm.
and then sometimes I come up with a solution that neither one of them had thought about, and they say, "Oh, that that will work." But that switch of not issuing an order and making people do it to working collaboratively is an interesting transition.
And we actually briefly spoke about that is because all of that then is wrapped in emotions. And you said something about timing that you've
Yeah.
learned and how critical that was. Talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. People sometimes wonder why a divorce takes a long time for some people. They say, you don't like this person, get out of it, move forward.
Yeah.
But we're not so mechanical. And there's a
Mm,
lot of emotion uh, at all sorts of levels, and a lot of fear about a divorce, both in terms of financially, um, being on one's own again, having to handle children's schedules and being with children by oneself. In a marriage, even if you are sometimes off doing different things from your spouse, you always in the back of your mind know that there's this other person who's there who can help out. Once you're divorced, that's no longer the case. And so
Mm.
adjusting to the changed circumstances can be very challenging. And, uh, I think of I used to think of a criminal case as like a show tune because it's fairly straightforward in how it moves from
Mm.
beginning to end, whereas a divorce action is a symphony because there are all
Wow.
sorts of emotions that play in the process, both the custodial issues with the children, financial issues, housing, um, retirement funds, something you know something about. Everything comes into play. Um, every aspect of a person's life comes into play in a divorce action.
There's a lot there. And you are right. You have to be you sort of have to lean into it. And people are on their timelines because when you rush it, there's resistance. Um, that's an interesting thing to consider as to why divorces take so long. That's I'm curious. I'm going to throw something at you. If you were at a cocktail party and you had to describe who you are, but you were not able to talk about what you do for a living, who would you say is Laura Drager?
Well, I like to think of myself as a fair person or someone who strives to be fair and um, judicious in how I see issues. So if somebody presents a problem to me, I want to hear, well, what's the other side? What would the
Mm.
other side or the third side, all of the sides to the problem have to say and not rush to judgment because I've heard only
Wow.
one uh, piece of the puzzle. And I like putting all of those pieces together.
How is it you've been married a long time, correct?
Yes. Yes.
How does that work? Yes. How does that work? If you had to practice it for a very long time. How does that work in your relationship? When there are disagreements in any relationship. Sort of navigating that. Do you apply that in your relationship? Listening to other point of view. How how does
Sometimes.
that work in your personal? You're always right.
It's very interesting. There are quite a number of divorce attorneys, practitioners who have been in long marriages, and
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. I think part of that is also because none of us want to be involved in a divorce because we see what
Yes.
goes on.
Yes, I hear that. I really do. That
Yeah,
you really
I
appreciate what you have
really,
at home. Yeah,
yeah.
that's true. What and I so I mentioned earlier that you are quite the traveler, and I know you recently visited African safari. What was that like? What was the most memorable moment?
Oh, it's such a different experience than any other traveling that I've done because you're in an entirely different environment of where there really are no people. It's really animals and animals who are living together, sometimes peacefully, not so peacefully, but are completely uninvolved in the kinds of issues that we as people are involved in, and it's an entirely different environment. It's beautiful visually and very, in a way, very relaxing because it's seeing something so different and so natural. So it's a wonderful experience. If people have the opportunity to do it, I strongly encourage anyone to take
Wow,
advantage of that opportunity.
just being. Yeah, that's I can picture that. And they say that like the most challenging part of traveling is really setting the making the first step outside of your front door for many people. It really is once you do it, you're hooked. And because there's so much out there to see. I know we talked about travels to China and just there's so many amazing remote places, and it's like it's a school of life. It lends a different perspective. What other passions or interests do you have?
Well, not so much now, but I had uh, competed in several triathlons, and
Wow. Oh
not
my goodness.
uh, not Ironman, the long triathlons, but in New York City they have a triathlon that is like kind of half shorter distances. But I loved it because it was in my backyard, and it was fun to train
Wow.
for that and to do it. I didn't do it well, but I finished, so that's
That's
that's really.
incredible. Wow.
And then, as
I
part
can
of my
I,
traveling, I've also done some bike trips in Europe and
oh really?
and in North America. Yeah, so that's fun.
Oh my god. That's fun. Do you still road bike?
I do. Although I just came back from a trip in Charleston and Savannah, and I must say I have used it. I use an e-bike now on those trips, which is great. Also,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
still and allows me to continue to do that as I age.
Nice.
Yeah.
As we all do. I
Right.
I know. I look back and I'm thinking, "What was I thinking?" That's just, you put yourself through so much, unnecessarily. But that's great. Just stay active and keep moving. That is truly wonderful.
I,
And I think we talked about that. As far as your pet peeves, what would you say is this one thing that consistently tests your patience?
well, there are a lot of things that do that. Um,
What stands out?
well, sort of in the practice area, I what 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 I find troubling is when people are not forthcoming and truthful. I certainly,
Mm,
as a judge, I could understand if a client has caused a lawyer difficulty, and I understand that a lawyer is not going to obviously not going to disclose all of the problems that he or she might be having with a client. But I always found the attorneys that I thought who handled that well were the ones who said, in effect, Judge, I can't get my client there yet, or I need more
mm,
time to work with my client, which
yeah,
which signaled to me that the lawyer is having difficulty, not that the lawyer doesn't understand
mm,
what is being said. And I think that to the extent that lawyers can treat each other candidly, to that extent, it helps it helps move the process along more smoothly. And I think that is something that I would always appreciate. And if people didn't do it, it became very frustrating. I don't know if
would
that's
that
as
be the
clear as it could be.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, no, clear as it can be, absolutely, being truthful and transparent. Would you say the same in personal life?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think personal life is a little bit more complicated because it may not be as clear what's motivating somebody,
Mm,
what is causing someone to behave a certain way. It's a little
mhm,
different when you have in a legal setting where you have a lawyer who is who has that distance to understand what a client is going through versus what I myself may be going through in a personal relationship. So,
mm.
yeah, I think to the extent we can be honest with each other, it's better. But I think that there are oftentimes a variety of reasons why none of us are as honest as we could be. Right?
Right, sometimes you're really trying to protect somebody, so you tell sort of a white you kind of tell sort of a
Correct.
truth, but right, it's not
Or
maliciously intended.
right, or you
Yeah,
may not be ready to
yeah.
fully disclose, or you may be uncomfortable, or you may be scared, or you know, feel threatened in some way by disclosing.
Mhm.
So
That
you
makes
know,
sense.
none of us are perfect.
No, oh, no,
Uh,
really?
yeah.
I know, right? That is so true. I say that we are so beautifully we are imperfectly perfect, we're, like, imperfectly
Right.
human, and then when you recognize that, and I think that's been really wonderful, and I see that through this podcast, is when people share themselves and are being vulnerable, and I think that really deepens the connection because, like you said, none of us are perfect. Obviously, dealing with what you deal with at work, life can be serious many times. What brings laughter and lightness to your life?
Oh, I think friends. And one of the things I know that the uh, people often speak not so well of the matrimonial bar, but in my experience, most of the attorneys that I have dealt with in the matrimonial bar are fabulous and fun people to be around. And I think because all of us, in one way or another, have gone through similar experiences, that when I get frustrated or I run into a problem, knowing there's someone I can talk to who would understand and have similar experiences is very helpful. I do want to
There's a
go back to what
Yeah.
you said, which is about when I was talking about being honest and open,
Mhm.
and if I can relate it to mediation, one of the things about mediation is that when people come in and are open with each other, which is what I always say you have to be. You have to be willing to be open with each other. Um, there are times that I've seen people come out of the process, um, if not being best of friends, at least being friendly
Mm,
with the other spouse, and being able, particularly if there are children involved, creating a new family structure that includes both parties in the child's life. And that's when that works, it's a very good feeling. It leads to a very good feeling.
yeah, because you are really changing. You're not terminating the relationship, you are changing the relationship, and you allowing them by leaning into whatever is in front of you and meeting them where they're at makes you such an effective mediator. And you guarding the process to make sure that it is a safe environment for both of them. And oftentimes, it's almost like you bring calm in the midst of chaos. I can see how that would help many couples get to resolution even faster and come out feeling like maybe we started out and not feeling so good, but we can at least respect each other moving forward.
Yeah, and that's what you hope happens, is that people feel better about where better about themselves and where they
Yeah,
have wound up, and that they can move forward with their lives, and not have the drag of this bad marriage or whatever was
yeah.
causing them to to separate.
Right. It doesn't have to end. It just changes because it impacts so many people. There's so many ripple effects to divorce. There are friends, there are relatives, and I think if you're able to transition into a respectful relationship, everybody else, it impacts everybody else. You have so much wisdom, and because you have such diverse experience, what advice would you give to incoming attorneys?
Oh, well, as I think one could see from my career, path. Nothing is certain, nothing is written in stone when you start. And I think that um, young attorneys, young by at least by experience, should be open to new opportunities that they may not have considered at the start. And you know, consider those possibilities, and also not be afraid to make a change. I mean, people, when I went from this white collar firm, or white shoe firm, I should say, to to a local district attorney's office, people thought I was crazy, but it's what
Yeah.
I it's what I wanted to do, and it worked. And when I switched to from criminal to matrimonial law, I knew nothing about matrimonial law at the time when I started, but I learned the area of law, and with time, developed the expertise that I needed to do the job, I think, well. And so having those constant new experiences is, I think, uh, very exciting, and makes the career path interesting. We all work so hard to become lawyers, that this is something that you should want to get up in the morning and go do, as opposed to it just being dreading going to work.
It's not a job. It's not a job. It can be a very rewarding career, and like you said, you have to sort of embrace it. That's an interesting perspective, is being open to change and having the flexibility, and being fluid because it can take you in so many different paths. This has been really a privilege to get to know you even more, and I had a feeling you have a little edge about you, and you're open to change, and outside of the wisdom and sense of fairness. I really appreciate you being so open and candid and honest, and we'll definitely have you back. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to all of our viewers and listeners, to find out more about Judge Drager and her services and how to get a hold of her, click on the bio link below. And do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast, and follow us on all social media channels. And until next time, stay curious and inspired.